Well, good afternoon or evening, everyone. My name is Catherine McGarry, Mayor of the City of Cambridge and co-chair of today's joint council meeting with the Township of North Dumfries. My co-chair for this afternoon is Sue Foxton, Mayor of the Township of North Dumfries. On behalf of both of our councils, we hope that everyone is staying safe and that you continue to practice physical distancing guidelines. Please always remember to wear your masks when you're out and about. Today's meeting marks our third joint council meeting between Cambridge and North Dumfries, and I know we're all excited to have the opportunity for our councils to work collaboratively together on initiatives to better serve both of our respective communities. So at this time, I'm going to ask our city clerk, Danielle Mountain, to complete a roll call of both councils so that we can confirm everyone's attendance as we are coming to you electronically today. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mann.
Present.
Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Councillor Adshade.
Present.
Councillor Mehta.
Present.
Mayor McGarry.
Present.
And Councillor Liggett has sent her regrets. And for the Township of North Dumfries, Councillor Rolleman.
Present.
Councillor Osner.
Present.
Councillor McCreary.
Present.
Councillor Gillespie.
Present.
Mayor Foxton.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. In addition, we're going to take a moment to welcome our staff that we have joining us today. And joining us electronically from the City of Cambridge, we have Cambridge City Manager David Calder and City Clerk Danielle Manton. Joining us electronically from the Township of North Dumfries, we have Chief Administrative Officer Andrew McNeely, Treasurer and Director of Corporate Services Shelley Steadall, and Township Clerk Ashley Sage. Also joining us this evening from Aird and Bearless, we welcome Mr. Ron Clark to answer any questions either council may have. As this is a virtual meeting, I'll remind each member of council who wishes to speak to press the raise hand feature on your video call, and the clerk and Mayor Foxton and I will do our best to track our speakers list today and then invite you to speak. As well, I will remind each member to please keep yourself on mute and then unmute yourself prior to speaking. And I think we're all guilty occasionally of forgetting that, including me. So I am now going to turn over the chair role to my co-chair, Mayor Sue Foxton. Great to see you this evening.
Thank you, and same to all of you. So declaration of pecuniary interests. This is a reminder to members of council that if you have made declarations of pecuniary interest at a previous meeting, you will also have to do so for the bylaw related to the same item. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will move forward with the agenda. And there's a delegation. As a result of social distancing guidelines being in place, imperfect public attendance at joint council meetings with the City of Cambridge and the Township of North Dumfries are not currently available. However, procedures are in place for electronic participation to allow for the public to provide written submissions to the clerk's office in advance of the meeting for items on the agenda, and to also call in via telephone to our virtual meeting. This evening, we don't have any registered delegations. We will now move into consideration of reports. So do we want to go ahead with the first motion, or are we going to have the report first, Danielle?
We can go ahead and put the motion on the floor, and then we can discuss it if you like.
Okay, so Councillor Rolleman, could you please read the motion for our councils?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Move by myself, second by Councillor Gillespie, that the councils of the City of Cambridge and Township of North Dumfries receive report 20-159, Terms of Reference, Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee, and that the councils approve the terms of reference and that the councilors Derek Ostner and Margaret McCreary from the Township of North Dumfries be appointed to the Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Rolman. Are there any questions for staff? I'd like to just make a comment here, if I may, and possibly, I'm not sure this is common knowledge. The province wants to get rid of the LDCs or bring them down to a workable number. I believe, and CEO McNeely, will you correct me on the number of LDCs in the province now? How many is there? Would you guess 60, or is that too high still?
Madam Mayor, I believe from recollection, it's in the low 70s across the province.
The province wants LDCs, the local distribution companies, which is what Energy Plus is, to go down to below 10. So they look favorably on mergers. And if you don't merge, eventually they may force mergers. If we do a merger, and we can do a number of different mergers, and we've talked about it before, either Kitchener or Waterloo, potentials with Woodstock we've looked at, which is gone by the wayside now, Midland. If we do this one with Brantford, that will move us into, I believe, 8th place in an LDCs, which is very comfortable place. That's not saying we should do it. You need to know that mergers are looked upon favorably by the province, and they like to see us moving that way. So are there any other, does council have any other comments in regards to this committee and the motion? Seeing none, I guess we can move towards the vote, please.
Certainly. So Councillor Rolman,
In favor?
Councillor Ostner,
In favor.
Councillor McCreary,
In favor.
Councillor Gillespie,
In favor.
and Mayor Foxton.
In favor.
All right, that motion is carried.
Thank you. And now, Councillor Devine, you now have the motion for consideration of reports, item number 1. Could you please read the motion for our councils?
I most certainly will. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay, good. Okay, City of Cambridge Terms of Reference Shareholders Strategy Strategic Advisory Committee, SSAC. Motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Recommendation that the councils of the City of Cambridge and the Township of North Dumfries, the shareholders receive report 20-15.9 bracket OCM. Terms of Reference Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee bracket SSAC. And that the councils approve the terms of reference Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee to be approved, and that councilors, okay. Have I done something wrong here?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll insert those names for you, Councillor Devine,
Thank you.
Councillor Adshade, Councillors Reed, and Councillors Mann.
Yes, from the City of Cambridge be appointed to the Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Are there any questions for staff? Does council have any comments at this time?
I have questions. Am I unmuted? No. I have a few questions, and I'm going to turn to Mr. Clark in regards to these. So as I see the process, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this group is going to come together. They are going to first look at the MOU as presented. And the MOU basically says we agree to look at a possible merger, not that we're agreeing to the merger. That's as I understand it. And then if that looks okay to this group, they present it to each of the councils and we vote upon the MOU, at which time it goes back to Energy Plus and they can move to the next phase. Then the next phases will be the nitty gritties, the breakdowns in percentages and valuation. And once that's formed by Energy Plus and the steering committee, it comes back to this group, which works with our consultants and our staff. And they evaluate and look at the options and redefine this. And then at that point, if they want changes, what happens? Does it go back to the steering committee? Does it go back to Energy Plus and then to the steering committee? What happens? Does it go to councils? See, this is another thing. Our council's behind. Brantford has known from day one all the information. My counselors have had nothing. I have requested several times they be given all the documents so that they know what we're talking about, because at this point, my counselors don't. Only these 3 meetings have given them information on all potential. So a lot of missing information. So they can't make good decisions without that information. I would like the councils, all of the counselors, to receive all of the information and then let the steering committee do their job. And when the steering committee comes back to us, we've had the information, we say, oh, I see what you're saying it. This should be changed to that. So it's better understanding. Now, I want to ask councils how they feel about that. Councillor Rossner.
Well, as part of the advisory committee, I'm hoping that we're going to get information, particularly about the assets of the Brantford Hydro, condition of their equipment, condition of their lines. Like my biggest concern is that we're not going to be taking on a lot of upcoming debt for upgrades, etc. I want to make sure that Brantford's coming in and adding to the asset of the group as a total. I don't want to take a mule on our backs, because it's going to cut into our coffers and Cambridge coffers as well with the profits that we all share from the hydro. So we got to look at this really in depth as to what exactly we're picking up. And I wouldn't even be adverse to, if it's possible, taking a trip down to Brantford and visiting some of the facilities and kind of see what we're getting, so we can see something tangible.
And that's part of this, the whole procedure is that evaluation that the steering committee will get. What I'm asking is that all councils get it. Councillor Query.
Councillor Foxton, just before she puts her hand up there, is there something that staff can weigh in on at the moment, or would Councillor McCreary rather ask her question here at this point? Because there's a number of questions being asked and we haven't really had an answer yet. Councillor McCreary?
I would agree that council hasn't received very much information yet, but I thought that was because we were just at the very beginning of this entire process. The purpose of the Shareholder Strategic Advisory Committee was that would be the main place where the information would be disseminated. The members of that committee would give it, or be assigned to give it a thorough review, but that all the information that the committee gets would also be going to council.
That's what I want.
I don't see a problem with the way this has been structured. We just haven't got started yet. We're just putting things in place.
No, and that's all I'm saying is I want council to have the information. And I've been requesting that for some time now. Councillor Hosner has this, I guess they want you to use the raise hand buttons. Do you ladies, because Councillor Hosner.
I'm going to ask at this point that people raise their hand feature, because it's too difficult in a screen like this to see it. So the raise hand feature is on the right-hand side of your screen at the bottom. And if you would do that, that would be very helpful. So whoever had their hand up now, please use your raised hand feature.
Councillor McCreary.
I'm going to ask them to actually put their raised hand feature up on the side of the screen so that we don't lose that, if that's
Let's just
okay.
make sure they can. Councillor Rossner, can you do that?
Okay, so the raise hand feature is not in the right hand corner, and I don't see it anywhere else on here.
If I may, Councillor Foxton.
Oh, there we go. It's
at the
under
very
more.
bottom of the screen. Yeah, under participants. If you make sure it's up on the side there, you can see the raised hand feature underneath.
Okay, and in my screen, it's in the top right hand corner.
Okay.
So I agree with Councillor McCreary. I want to make sure that as the Strategic Advisory Committee, that we're getting the proper information to bring to council, rather than this just be part of the process and we're just doing this because that's what we have to do as part of the process. I want the information to come to us so we can thoroughly look at it, We've got 4 great counselors from Cambridge and 2 from North Dumfries. I think we can get through this together and do a lot of the legwork so that the information that does come to council is not overwhelming and difficult to understand. I'm hoping that we can decipher what we're going to bring to council.
Thank you. And I'm just going to switch to City Manager David Calder at this point. And I also see that Councillor McCreary, Councillor Devine also had their hands up, but I'm going to go to Mr. Calder at this point. Mr. Calder.
Thank you, Mayor McGarry and Mayor Foxton. I just wanted to remind the group that if you approve the terms of reference, the terms of reference actually outline exactly the key milestones that the steering committee would be reviewing. And those are under item 2E. So I think those items would be decision points that the SSAC would then make recommendations on to the councils, who would then in turn provide recommendations to the Board of Directors of Energy Plus. I also wanted to have Mr. Clark weigh in regarding the dissemination of information, because I think this is a key component in terms of why we even thought of having an SSAC. To Councillor Ostner's point, is to have a core group that can really filter through the information and provide recommendations to the larger councils. But I think we have to also remember this is a business transaction that has to be very closely held to the vest at certain points in time to ensure exactly what, again, Councillor Austin mentioned, is valuations, the profits, the percentages. Those are all things that this group, as the steering committee, will be privy to, and will have to ensure that certain items remain confidential, because anything that does get out inadvertently can cost you as the overseers, as the shareholders of the utility, can be expensive mistakes to make. So I'm not saying anything would happen, but we just want to ensure that a smaller group of people can really decipher the information and then make recommendations. We will do that through reporting to the councils. So there will be background information, but it may not be all the details that would be being discussed in the actual merger. But if I may, if it's okay with the mayors, if Mr. Clark could weigh in just on best practice, which this is one of those issues, best practice is to have this type of advisory committee. I'll ask your permission to allow him to speak.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mayor McGarry. Thank you, Mayor Foxton, as well. I'm very appreciative of the discussion so far and the understanding that's been shown of the salient points of the terms of reference and the process going forward. I think it's been a good kickoff of where we're going. I want to address a couple of the issues that have been brought up. The first is in terms of the information flow both up and down and the ability to influence the process, which I think is fundamental. And that's been brought up. And so there are a few players, first of all, and a few committees that have already been struck, and it's worth it to talk about the relationship between the various levels. Of course, in my mind, primarily, and I think everybody around the virtual table, the councils will have the ultimate say. What does that mean in practical terms? So the SSAC is a delegation, a subset of some of the councils, as Mr. Calder just mentioned, to kind of be able to dig into the issues and spend more time on them, because there's a lot of information and some of the matters are fairly complex. So it's a tool of the councils, the SSAC, as I see it, and it's set out in the terms of reference. There's also instructions and information flow to and from the boards of directors of the utility on this side, on Energy Plus. And of course, we have to keep in mind that Brantford on the other side is doing the same thing. And then there's a joint steering committee. Now, it's important to understand what that is. And of course, some of the participants in this meeting are already members of it. But it's important to keep that in mind, because there's a ton of work that's been done at the Joint Steering Committee meeting between the two utilities together. And that's been, as I understand it, certain members of the boards of directors and management as well. And we've already received some of that information in terms of draft documentation and terms and deal terms and that sort of thing. But the boards and the SSACs will still have to evaluate that on behalf of council. Specifically, I want to address Mayor Foxton's comment about whether, or question whether that's just kind of recommendations going up and then they'll be kind of accepted, or whether there'll be input. And in my mind, it's very important that councils through the SSAC be able to digest the information and provide input back to the steering committee or through the boards of directors. And to me, it's a process that's a consultation almost. It's a flow of information back and forth. It's certainly not a one-way street. As I've said before to both council, to the joint meetings of councils, councils ultimately have responsibility for approving the deal. And until they're comfortable with the transaction and comfortable with the information that they've had and that they're able to evaluate the transaction, then that approval is not going to happen. To get to that approval means a discussion and a negotiation and an information and a back and forth process. In terms of that information, and one of the councillors particularly raised this idea of getting into the nitty gritty and understanding not only the transaction, but the state of the utility on the Brantford side that's being merged with. That is fundamental, and I agree that's a key point. And part of this process that we'll be embarking on is what's referred to as due diligence. And I'm sure everybody's heard that term, but to understand what it means both a legal and financial analysis of information, extensive information disclosure that's going to have to be given by the utility on the other side. And this can be expected with regard to Energy Plus as well. And then there'll be an evaluation and analysis by not only the legal perspective, but the financial and operational perspective as well. And reports will be provided to the SSAC and ultimately the council on that analysis. And from that, you can build on what the agreements need to contain in order to address either deficiencies or questions about valuation and address issues about relative valuation. So that's some of the important aspects of the process as it unfolds, and the SSAC's part in that process. I'm happy to take.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. If I could just try and get clarification here as I initially started out before I was cut off. So you say the SSAC is going to be going to the steering committee? They're not going to be reporting to council? Because that's what I wrote down that you said.
Sorry, I may have misspoken. The SSAC is very much, to me, a creature of and reports to councils. The information flow, and I would even go further to say that there probably will be not much, if any, direct communication with the steering committee from the SSACs. The SSAC, I would expect, would report to council and would, at the behest of council, at the instruction of council, possibly, or council directly, deal with the board of directors on the Energy Plus side, which would then feed into the steering committee as appropriate.
That's what I was hoping it was going to do. So the SSAC will inform council. Once council has agreed upon the information that they provided, then that they will provide that information to the Board of Energy Plus board. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping would happen. Now, I think our council's still in the dark. Councilors, please tell me if I'm wrong. Do you have sufficient? I know we're trusting this at the SSAC, and I totally do trust them. But it'd be nice to have some information in regards to what's gone on so far and what types of things we're looking at. And I know it's a lot, but maybe a brief could be written up for all councilors so they have complete knowledge of where we're really at in the process and where we're going. So there's no misconception. It doesn't mean that each of us are going to get into the nitty gritty, but knowledge makes it so much easier to digest the information we're getting. Just my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. And I think since
Excuse me, it's Mayor Foxton, and I think
I'm sorry about that,
Sorry.
Mayor
Mayor-
Foxton.
Councillor McCreary, can you do a raised hand? Oh, you
She
got it.
has.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mayor Foxton, that we will go to your members of council here that have their hands raised, since you've asked a question there. So we'll go to Councillor McCreary. Go ahead.
I would just like to say that I think the flow of information is going to start with the SSAC. And I think at this point, I have a thorough understanding of what we are going to be looking at, but the information flow is just going to be starting once we get this committee going. So I don't think there is any problem. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll go, I see Councillor Ostner, you have your hand up. Did you want to speak again?
You forgot to take it down.
Oh, do you have to take it down too?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
It's-
okay.
it's
Well,
mo- yes.
it's a pop down menu. Sorry, my hand is lowered. I'm gonna keep quiet right now.
Okay, thank you. We're all guilty of that. I've also been guilty of many infractions so far. Is that it then? I just wanted to do another scan for the North Dumfries councillors. And if not, we'll go forward to other hands raised from Cambridge, if that's okay. Last call, I see no further from there. So I'm going to go forward now to Councillors Devine and Councillors Mann from Cambridge. Councillor Devine, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, I mean, my understanding through this whole process, it's a merger between the two corporations. Is that correct?
Potential.
No, potential. Well, okay, potential. Please don't correct me. All right. And I don't think that if somebody's not talking, they can probably mute their mic. So that's, yeah, the potential merger. So as far as the information process, I agree with Councillor McCreary. I mean, this is the start of the process. If we wanted more information before this, we all should have asked for it, for sure. Okay, so but the evaluation of the Brantford Hydro. I mean, let's face it. Most of us here would know a switch gear from a transformer. I mean, you go look at all the equipment you want, but we're not going to know a switch gear from a transformer. As we go through this process, okay, and it's a business decision. Clearly, it's a business decision. As we go through this process, are we going to bring in a consultant or consultants to evaluate what's being purchased? Because the 5 people that are going on this committee, they're not going to be able to evaluate it. I mean, you're going to go look at the equipment. What are you looking at? Equipment. You don't know if it's functional. You don't know if it's non-functional. You don't know if it's up to date. You don't know if it's 40 years behind. All right. You don't know if there has to be $6 million or $10 million put into the system or to upgrade it. Just like Brant are going to want to have a look at our stuff too. So are we possibly looking at bringing in somebody, some expertise in that field on the equipment? Because I don't recall seeing it in the write-up, or did I miss it? Somebody answer that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Devine. And I think we're not quite there yet. I might ask Mr. Calder or Mr. Clark to answer that for you.
If I
Mr.
can, Mayor
Calder.
McGarry, thank you. And through you and Mayor Foxton to Councillor Devine. Part of our retaining of Mr. Clark was also to retain other expert staff or other expert consultants to help the steering committee through this process. One of those experts would be in the area of valuation. KPMG, if I recall, has been retained to do some of that work. There's also other consultants that would be retained as needed as we go through the process with the steering committee. So yes, outside expertise will be engaged in order to help the steering committee make good decisions.
Okay, may I respond to that, Mayor McGarry?
Go ahead, Councillor Devine.
Thank you very much. So I just have to make some assumptions here because it's early in the game. I have to make some assumptions on this potential merger. That when we get the report back, there's going to be a dollar figure attached to whatever is required on their particular system. Is that a fair statement?
Sorry, perhaps Mr. Clark can answer that question.
Go ahead, Mr. Clark.
I want to make sure I'm unmuted. I think it'll be more, I think that the short answer is yes. There'll be an assessment, both in terms of valuation and operational condition of the physical plant as well. Certainly a big chunk of that work would be done by Energy Plus, and they obviously have expertise in running a utility and in transformers and wires, et cetera, and how to value that and the state of that physical plant. Ultimately, there will be a dollar figure in terms of the value of both Energy Plus and Brantford Hydro. The important aspect of it, of course, is that they're both valued using the same standard. So you have relative valuations of each other and then can decide what percentages are appropriate for each of the shareholders on each side. So there'll be, and the dollar amount that we're referring to, so it'll cover not only the physical plant, but also the financial structure, and try to normalize across the different debt and equity ratios, the outstanding promissory notes, the different types of debt, the interest payments, dividends expected, et cetera, rates. So all of that has to be analyzed, and ultimately you do get to a dollar valuation of each.
Thank you. Councillor Devine, is that it for your questions then?
That's it for the moment. Thank you.
Okay. I see Councillors Mann and then Mayor Foxton next on the screen. Councillor Mann, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, and in answer to Mayor Foxton's question, my understanding is that this is really the starting point for us. So as far as the information is concerned, I think we are all in the same boat, that we have very limited information. And I don't know about the other members of the committee, but I have a brief understanding of this. And my hope is that through the expertise that will come forward, we will have a very good understanding of this, so that when we come back to our respective councils, we'll be able to present it in a way that we understand what it is we've been tasked to do, and we have the experts to help us to understand it. And then we have the capacity and the ability to present it in such a way that our councils will understand as well. So I really look at it as we're at the starting gate, and we are just getting started by forming the committee and approving terms of reference, and then moving on from there. And I think the days and the weeks and probably months ahead are going to be busy for this committee because of the work that's involved and the understanding that needs to take place in the analysis and all kinds of things that we have got to get ourselves up to speed on. So it's an exciting time, but it's also a very task oriented, I think. And like I said, we're just at the bell hasn't even sounded yet.
Thank you. And Mayor Foxton, go ahead, Madam
Thank
Mayor.
you. To Councillor Devine, I was not interrupting. You did ask a question. You said, "Is that correct?" And you paused. So I thought it was a question, and therefore I was responding to your question. In regards to Energy Plus, Energy Plus will be hiring consultants to evaluate the Brantford areas. Mr. Calder, were you suggesting that we also hire consultants to do the same thing? Because it gets expensive if you're hiring the same consultants, but was that what you were stating? Or are we going to talk maybe with Energy Plus and work together on the consultant?
Through you, Mayor McGarry, to Mayor Foxton. Yes, separate consultants. Each party has different interests. The board of directors of Cambridge or Energy Plus has different interests than what the shareholders have. So you need to do your due diligence as a shareholder. Hence, you're having a separate steering committee with different inputs and different things that you need to look at in order to ensure that the shareholder asset is protected. So yes, there'll be some substantial costs for the shareholder. But I want to remind that under the MOU, there are provisions for costs. So that's one of the things that the steering committee will look at as one of their first orders of business once the committee is established.
Maybe I should clarify what I meant by consultants. I'm regarding to the consultants that will be looking at the nuts and bolts of Brantford and whether their infrastructure is sound or not. That's the type of consultant I'm talking about. Energy Plus has already discussed that they're going to do that in depth because they do not want to take on debt or faulty equipment. So are you saying we should also be doing that, having a separate consultant?
That's correct. A second consultant will do a peer review of the material that is submitted by Energy Plus to the shareholder.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions right now? Last call. Any questions? And then I will ask if there's any further comments at this point before I call the vote, and then I'll be handing back to Mayor Foxton at that time. Councillor Devine, go ahead.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Once we get beyond this point, how often do we expect to be updated in this process? As councillors, as council? Or is it going to be a situation where the steering committee will do what they have to do, then just bring a final report? What's the plan?
If I may, Mayor McGarry?
Yes, and then I see Mayor Foxton has her hand up too, so I'll go to Mr. Calder first.
Yes, so the intent would be that, as noted, there'd be some fairly significant meetings of the steering committee over a short period of time. We're suggesting that there'd probably be a meeting of the steering committee every 2 weeks, or at least a check-in every 2 weeks. The steering committee would then determine when it needs to report. I shouldn't say when it needs, when it's required to report to council. And it would be at various milestones throughout this process. Some of those are outlined within the terms of reference, as I mentioned earlier, that decision points would have to be made by the two councils. But those recommendations would come up from the steering committee. So I can't tell you that it's going to be once a month or twice a month. It'll be when the steering committee is prepared to make those recommendations. I will say too that this will be outlined through guidance through Mr. Clark, in terms of he will be also negotiating sort of between the parties. So his guidance will be important as well in terms of checking in with the councils at these various milestones.
Okay, is it safe to assume from a councilor's perspective, mayor and council perspective, that there'll be no information handed out from the steering committee until it comes to council?
Through you, Mayor McGarry, to Councillor Devine. Yes, that's the intent. It would be, as Mr. Clark talked about earlier, the flow of information is from the steering committee to council, from council to the board of directors, and vice versa. Board of directors communicates to council, council sends it back to the steering committee.
Okay, that's fine. As long as the steering committee is not chewing in people's ears, everybody should hear it from the same people at the same time, whether it be a councillor or mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor Foxton, you had your hand up. And I might just check in with you, Mayor Foxton, just in order to address some of the council committees. And I know that you and I have been sitting at the steering committee, but anecdotally, I think if I recall at the steering committee, we were looking to look for council members that were able to be nimble and available at a fairly short notice, depending on what comes up. And that is, it makes it difficult to actually define exactly how many hours, when that's going to be, and that we were looking for being able to be nimble and being quick. Is that your recollection, Mayor Foxton?
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes, yes. And that's exactly what we told our councillors before they decided to run or put their names forward.
Thank you. All right. I know that this is a lot of information, so I'm just going to look again for anybody that would like to provide a comment at this point before we call for the vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Mann, I see. Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. And I just have, and I'm sorry, this is a question for David. You were referring to the steering committee and a number of the comments that you made, David. Was that really the SSAC that you were referring to? Because I just want to make sure that I have it clear in my mind who's doing what.
Yes, through you, Mayor McGarry, Mayor Foxton. Sorry for the confusion. Yes, there's the hydro utility has a steering committee. Now the shareholder has one too, but yes, the SSAC is what I was referring to, this proposed steering committee.
Thanks, David.
Sorry, just conferring with the clerk. And Councillor Mehta, I see your hand up. Councillor Mehta, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick comment that I would like to receive some updates where possible throughout the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Calder? I just see that you're unmuted, that's all.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, yeah, that again, it'll be the SSAC will determine when those touch points are required to council, but yes, they will be checking in every so often, depending on what decisions have to be made. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mehta, that's it for you then? Okay. And again, last comments, and I will just remind everybody, because I know it's been time, but we still have the motion on the floor about number 1, the terms of reference, the Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee. So we're getting ready to call that vote, and then I'll be handing back to Mayor Foxton. So seeing no further questions or comments from members of either council, then we will go ahead, and I'll now ask the clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
He's muted. You're muted, Nicholas.
Sorry, in favor. Thanks.
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. Over to you, Mayor Foxton.
Well, my council has to vote, so is, no, we don't have to vote. Oh, that's right, it's for you guys, okay. And now going on to the next one. Excuse me. We'll now move on to the introduction of the consideration of the bylaws. Councillor Rollerman, would you please read the motion for our council?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move myself, seconded by Councillor Gillespie, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee for the Township of North Dumfries. Whereas Municipal Act 2001 as amended, Section 8 confers broad authority on municipalities, thereby allowing them to govern their affairs as they consider appropriate and to enhance their ability to respond to municipal issues. And whereas the Council of Township of North Dumfries deems it expedient to appoint persons to provide for and assist in the administration, protection, and management of the municipality. And whereas the appointment set out herein shall coincide with the term of council unless otherwise specified. And whereas the appointment shall remain in effect until replacement appointments are made by resolution or amendments to the appointment bylaw. Now, therefore, the Council of the Corporation of Township of North Dumfries enacts as follows. 1, that the following members be appointed to the Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee, SSAC, representing the Township of North Dumfries. 1, Councillor Derek Ostner. 2, Councillor Margaret McCreary. 3, Andrew McNeely, CAO, non-voting. 4, Shelley Stedell, Treasurer Director of Corporate Services, non-voting. Read a first, second, and third time. Actually, I have this part. Read first, second, and third time, and finally passed this day, the 7th day of October 2020.
Thank you, Councillor Williman. Are there any questions for staff? Are there any comments from council? I just have one, and it could be, and again, you guys don't have to agree with me. It seems to be the rule tonight. And the first the paragraph where it says, whereas the appointments set out herein shall coincide with the term of council unless otherwise specified. I wonder if we could say, whereas the appointments set out herein shall, will coincide with the term of council or the merger is decided. So that it ends, if the decision is made to merge or not merge, the decision is made, then that's when this council, that SSAC also ends. Is that a friendly amendment? Andrew, what do you think?
Madam Mayor, I'm going to look to Mr. Clark because there's a series of processes once a decision is made locally by the respective shareholders. Actually, a whole series of paperwork is then forwarded to the OEB, and there may be follow-up work required by the OEB that then turns back to the shareholders, and the SSAC may be the appropriate forum in which to deal with whatever that initial work would be and make recommendations back to the respective councils. The wording that was placed in both appointment bylaws, both for the city and the township, did reflect the fact that there are local approvals through the shareholders, but there's also an OEB process that ultimately has to be undertaken through the provincial government agency.
Thank you,
Mr. Clark, have I accurately reflected that?
I will remove my amendment just based upon what you said. That makes a lot of sense. So if there are any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, then clerk, could we please have the vote?
Councillor Rolman,
In favor?
Councillor Osner,
In favor.
Councillor McCreary,
In favor?
Councillor Gillespie,
In favor?
and Mayor Foxton.
In favor.
Okay, that carries.
And now it's back to Mayor McCreary. McGarry, not McCreary, McGarry.
It's okay. I got your name wrong earlier. Tit for tat. It does happen. Anyway, thank you. So Councillor Ermetta, you now have the motion for introduction and consideration of bylaws. Could you please read the motion for our councils in its entirety? Councillor Ermetta.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. The motion is moved by myself. I need to know who the seconder is. I missed the email.
It's Councillor Devine.
Okay, Councillor Devine is the seconder. Confirmatory bylaw 20-095, being a bylaw of the City of Cambridge and the Township of North Dumfries to confirm the proceedings of the councils of the City of Cambridge and the Township of North Dumfries at its joint meeting held electronically.
Just 1 second, Councillor Ermetta. I'm
Did
sorry.
I just do Cambridge?
No, it was just at the very beginning, the number. I think you said 095, but it's actually 094 on my paper. Would you mind just starting again? Just
right,
appointment
095.
No, 094 is what I have.
That's what I have too.
Yeah,
is 094.
20-095.
Sorry, Mayor
So
Foxton,
at
what
its
do you
joint
have
meeting
on that?
held electronically on the 7th day of October 2020.
Okay, I'll read. Would you like me to read it for
I
you,
have
Councillor Ermetta?
095.
Would you like me to read it for you, Councillor Ermetta?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sorry for the confusion.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Moved by Councillor.
Sure. Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Ermetta, seconded by Councillor Devine. 20094, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Shareholder Strategic Advisory Committee for the Corporation of the City of Cambridge. Whereas the Municipal Act 2001, as amended, Section 8, confers broad authority on the municipalities, thereby allowing them to govern their affairs as they consider appropriate and to enhance their ability to respond to the municipal issues. And whereas the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge deems it expedient to appoint persons to provide for and assist in the administration, protection, and management of the municipality. And whereas the appointments set out herein shall coincide with the term of council unless otherwise specified. And whereas the appointments shall remain in effect until replacement appointments are made by resolution or amendments to the appointment bylaw. Now, therefore, the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge enacts as follows: that the following members be appointed to the Shareholders Strategic Advisory Committee, SSAC, representing the Corporation of the City of Cambridge: Councillor Adshade, Councillor Reid, Councillor Mann, David Calder, Chief Administrative Officer, non-voting; Cheryl Ayers, Treasurer, non-voting. That this bylaw shall come into full force on the day it's passed and enacted this 7th day of October 2020.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, does council have any comments at this time? I see none, so I'm ready now to ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
In favor. In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta. Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. And now I hand it back to Mayor Foxton. Go ahead, Mayor Foxton.
Thank you. Our next item is the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor McCreary, will you have the motion? Please read it in its entirety.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Rowland. Confirmatory bylaw number 3193-20, being a bylaw of the City of Cambridge and the Township of North Dumfries to confirm the proceedings of the councils of the City of Cambridge and the Township of North Dumfries at its joint meeting held in Cambridge on the 7th day of October 2020.
Passed and enacted on the 7th. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor McCreary. We'll now ask the clerk to call for the vote.
Councillor Rollman,
In favor?
Councillor Osner,
Could I have clarification, please? Because on the confirmative bylaw that I'm looking at, the motion is seconded by myself, not Councillor Rowland.
Oh, we updated the movers list.
You did. Okay, so it's correct, Councillor Rowland?
Because I also have Councillor Osner. You're on mute, Danielle.
You're muted.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, we may have made an update to the movers list, so you may be looking at an older copy. Ashley, you may want to update based on your most recent list.
yeah, I'll make that change. Make sure that that's
As
correct.
long as the minutes reflect that, I'm in favor.
Okay. Councillor McCreary,
In favor.
Councillor Gillespie,
In favor.
Mayor Foxton.
In favor.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Okay, Mayor McGarry, you're on again.
Thank you. It's the back and forth scene. It's easier when we're in one spot. I can tell you that. Thank you. Councillor Adshade, you have the motion for the confirmatory bylaw. Will you please read it in its entirety? And I think Councillor Mann may be seconding this. Go ahead, Councillor Adshade.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mann to confirm the bylaw 20-095, being a bylaw of the city of Cambridge and the township of North Dumfries to confirm the proceedings of the councils of the city of Cambridge and the township of North Dumfries at this joint meeting held electronically on the 7th day of October 2020, passed and enacted on the 7th day of October 2020.
Thank you. I'll now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade. Sorry, Councillor Adshade on mute.
In favor? Yeah.
Thank you.
I in favor. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reed.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you. And I think it's over to you, Mayor Foxton.
Thank you. And we're moving to the close of the meeting. Councillor Ostner, you have the motion for our close meeting. Please read it in its entirety, please.
I move by myself and seconded by Councilor McCreary that the council meeting does now adjourn at 6:57 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Ostner. I will now ask the clerk to call for the vote.
Councillor Rollman,
In favor?
Councillor Ostner,
In favor.
Councillor McCreary,
In favor?
Councillor Gillespie,
In favor.
Mayor Foxton.
In favor.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. And Mayor McGarry, you're up.
Thank you. Back and forth, follow the bouncing ball. All right. At our close of meeting, I will ask Councillor Adshade to, as he has the motion for our close of meeting, please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wolf, that this special council meeting is now adjourned at 6:58 p.m.
Thank you. I'll now call on our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade.
In favor?
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor?
Councillor Reed.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. Mayor Foxton.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone. This concludes our meeting for today. Thank you for joining us this evening, and a reminder to stay safe, North Dumfries and Cambridge, and please take care of each other. Thanks, guys. It was a great meeting.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Clark, for all the work you've done, and the CAOs behind the scene. And good
Yes.
luck to the SAC group.
And happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Oh,
Thank
yes.
you.
Yes.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.